AI is going to take our job.
Hit record on it, suck a little bit,
No one was talking about it.
and just put out garbage content.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Dustin PolyInnovator. Today I'm talking with Nick Nalbach. He is a podcast launch coach, a podcaster. He's the host of the 9 to 5 podcast, AI tools guru, and NextGen podcaster. Thank you for joining me in the Poly Tools Creator Spotlight.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dustin. Guru's a little intense for me, but I mean, I guess I'll take it for right now.
I kind of thought you would say something about that, but I was like, it definitely seems like the right kind of fitting word for it. I know some people kind of associate the productivity guru and it's kind of like a bad thing kind of thing, but I think guru is kind of a nice thing because you're teaching people how to be a podcaster, how to be a next-gen podcaster.
Yeah, and a lot of it, like, to be honest, is a lot of it's just testing. Like, we're playing with a lot of the tools at NextGen Podcaster, and then we just kind of pass along that information. So that's why I feel like Guru, I'm in the learning process just as much as anybody else, and I just like to share the information because if it can help me, it can help other people.
I was just going to jump on that because I love the idea of making content based on what you're learning. It's kind of like a documentation thing like Gary Vee always talks about. Whenever I get really obsessed about a new topic, like Web3 got really in the news for a while there, and Metaverse and all that jazz, I got really into learning about it. And then I made a pillar, or like a blockbuster post, as it's called, just talking about all that I learned. And I think that was a great way to kind of regurgitate what I learned.
That is an awesome strategy. I love that. And my problem was that I would always be learning so much stuff that was like not quite related. So I'm like, this is way too much content. I need to find a focus here. I need to dial it in.
Time for you to make a Substack for your own personal brand too.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So it's interesting with this show. We talk to modern content creators about their journey. I love tools. On the other podcast that I do, I had a number of creators on there, but it's about being multidisciplinary. So like the conversation about content creation would only be about a fourth of the conversation. But I love talking shops with people like yourself, Nick. And that's why I made this show. So I want to kind of get into a lot of that. The way I like to break the ice is to have you share something about yourself that no one knows about you.
Oh, that no one knows about me.
I think I stole that from John Lee DeMoss or something like that, and I just always kept it.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that one. So okay, I'll throw it out there. So back in high school, I used to do ski jumping. Actually, it was like when I was younger, all the way through end of high school. I used to do ski jumping, and I actually went over to Park City, Utah, and got to compete in like a junior Olympics kind of thing on the Olympic hills over there. And throughout the several years that I had done that, competed against several Olympians in the space. They completely crushed me every step of the way, but I was still on the same stage as several Olympians. So that was pretty cool. I really enjoyed that experience.
That's fantastic. It shows you what can be also possible too, so it kind of motivates you to do more.
That was the thing. And like a lot of people that I had competed with, like from the US, are now competing at that Olympic level. So it was like when you're around everyone that's doing that, it's like, oh, it seems so much more possible. And ended up with an injury and didn't really pursue that anymore. So it was fun while it lasted, but yeah.
What was the injury?
Actually, the injury came from football in high school, and I fully dislocated my shoulder, like tore my labrum, did that whole thing, and I had a desire to play college baseball, and I didn't want to further injure myself ski jumping, crashing, doing all that kind of stuff. So I hung up the skis and broke out the baseball glove and went and played college baseball instead.
That's awesome though. At least you still kept on with the whole physicality of sports and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that was pretty much my entire life growing up. Nothing but sports.
I didn't ever get into sports much, but I was telling you before the call, I did get into swimming. I've taught it for a decade now, and I love being in the pool. A lot of people who do get injuries like that, they came into the pool to recover and get that resistance and the water pressure too.
Yeah, that swimming has been one that's always been interesting to me. My wife was a swimmer like all through high school, and she absolutely loves it. And I can't swim as good. I can swim, but I can't swim as good. So it's more frustrating for me if I try to turn it into a workout.
Well, just a little shout out here. I actually made a newsletter to help people to learn how to swim better. It's like more logical based, and I can send that to you or leave it in the description too for people. But it's like literally meant for people like you and newer too, but people who need to know what to do in this situation and like the what, how, and why kind of thing.
That's interesting. I'll definitely check that out.
So the reason why I like that question, I don't send it up to you ahead of time, like you probably noticed there. I sent you the regular questions. The icebreaker, I find that in order to break the ice, it kind of has to be a little bit shocking, like you jump into the cold water. And once you get out of the way, like once you get out of the cold water, you're kind of refreshed now. Now it's like every other question underneath, it's going to be way easier.
Oh yeah, yeah. That was probably the hardest question I'm gonna get all day.
Well, the first question here is what got you started as a content creator?
So content creation as a whole, I got started because I wanted to step into the entrepreneur space.
Mhm.
I had just gotten my first my big boy job, my supposedly career job, and I realized it wasn't a fit for me. So I started exploring what was out there in the entrepreneur space, and I didn't really know that it was something anybody could do. Like, oh, you could just go start your own business and start making money. Like to me, that was kind of a foreign idea. I always thought you had to be like an Elon Musk or someone big with a lot of money in order to start something. So I started dipping my feet in the entrepreneur space, and I started blogging
Mm.
as a way to like kind of share what I was learning through like digital marketing and social media marketing and all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of what kicked it all off, was just kind of sharing what I was learning, kind of what we were talking about before the call here. Or maybe it was at the beginning. I can't keep track anymore. But yeah, so it all started blogging, and then I really wanted to get into video, like really bad. So I got everything set up. I had like a GoPro that I was using and like a little mic, and I would just freeze every single time I would come on camera. Like I knew what I wanted to talk about. Like I spent a lot of time with SEO, and I was like, I was going to create SEO related content. And every time I turned the camera on, it was like I'd go blank,
Mm.
and then I'd pack up all my camera stuff, put it away, and then the next day I'd come out and do it again, and it was like the same thing, and it was so frustrating. And then I had the idea, like, because TikTok was coming up like big when I started getting into the video stuff. I
Mhm.
was like, maybe I'll dabble in TikTok. I'll just post stuff on there. If no one sees it, no one sees it. If they do, maybe I'll grow an audience. Who knows? And that kind of got me a little bit more comfortable with the idea of video, but still not enough to like just come in front of a camera and start talking. So I was
Right.
like, a podcast. I could interview people. I could talk to people, and then they're carrying half the weight. Like it's not just
Yeah.
me talking for 20 minutes. Like I can actually have a conversation. And once I started the podcasting stuff, I just the whole content creation, like everything about it, I just kind of fell in love with, and then got comfortable with the video, and just kind of brings us to where we are today. Like I'd spend a lot of time with video now, but it was definitely a progression to get here.
This is an interview about you, so I don't want to talk about myself too much, but I definitely want to jump in on this because I had a similar feeling when it came to video. I started out as a blog and then started doing some podcasting, and then I was trying to do video. I was on Vine back in the day, but it was more as like a social media user rather than a content creator. So I wasn't really used to making video, and I had a hard time looking at the camera, reading off a script, and being comfortable on camera. It was that stage fright.
Yeah.
I got over a lot of the stage fright because of karaoke. That was helpful. But if you
Yes.
don't have something like that, it's like you're looking at the camera and it's almost like an abyss. Now it feels like an eye. I'm looking at you in the eye now because I'm looking at the camera. But when you first start out, it's almost like a black abyss and you get kind of scared and overwhelmed. And it's just, you have to get past it. You have to put in the reps because otherwise you won't do it. And I think the TikTok helped you get through those reps.
Exactly. And I think I'm a firm believer that if you don't push yourself outside of your comfort zone, you can't grow. And I think that was the hardest thing to wrap my head around, was that I needed to push through, like do those bad videos, like hit record on it, suck a little bit, and then come back and do it again tomorrow. And eventually it's just going to continue to get better and better. I like to bring up the fact, like when we're kids, when we're really little, we don't know how to do anything.
Mhm.
We're just figuring it out. And you fall down and you get back up and you try again. And you're not thinking, you're not in your own head like, oh, shoot, I can't do this. Like, you're not thinking about it at all. You're just like, I'm going to get back up and do it again. You'll run at the wall again, whatever. And as we become adults, we kind of become more conscious of what we're doing and everyone else around us. And we become self conscious.
Mhm.
And it can really drag you down. Like, I wish I would have overcome that sooner. Like, I really do, because the whole content creation thing is so fun to me now. But it was such a hurdle, and yeah, it took those reps and just sucking for a little bit in order to get more comfortable and feel confident in what I was doing.
And what I noticed too is that those reps count for every content type. So not only if you if you become a content creator with whether it's written, audio, or video, you put 100 reps in, you get experience with that type of content, that pillar type. Then you still kind of have to start from scratch with the other two as well. And Roberto Blake and Nick Nimmin, a lot of these big creators, they always talk about doing 100 reps, doing 100 reps, and just putting in those reps first. But they don't. no one really talks about the fact that you have to do 100 reps 3 times too in order to get good at all of it. And then once you do, there's that kind of there's almost a combined factor. You start to realize, oh, I could repurpose this. I could take this video, then cut out the audio, and then make it into a blog post. And so then you have like 100 reps of repurposing too, which is the next level.
Well, and you know, I think the big thing that puts people into that like negative mindset about themselves, especially starting out, is because you're comparing yourself to the other creators.
Yeah.
Like you're likely getting into the content creation because you've seen someone else do it and you aspire to be like that. And then when you start creating content, you're thinking like my content has to be like that. It has to be that good. Otherwise I can't put it out. And we don't see the years of reps that they've taken to get to that point where it looks super crisp, super sharp. They're on point every time. Uh, they started out the same way that everyone else did. They sucked at the beginning too, and they just kind of pushed past that. And we have to do that exactly the same. We have to. Someone just the other day said we have to stop comparing our step 1 to someone else's step 20.
Right.
It makes a huge difference when you can realize where you're at and focus on what you need to work on, and then make your own progress and not compare it to what someone else is doing.
About a month ago, I went to a YouTuber conference and I saw all these different YouTubers, 160,000, 300,000 or more subscribers. And a lot of them didn't know as much as you or I did when it came to the space, like experience wise and just like knowledge of SEO and that kind of thing, because they had niches like whether it was like animations or technology stuff that would grow a lot faster, just niche wise, topic wise. And while I wasn't jealous or angry at them about it, I was upset, and I was upset because my channels are small, and it's not because they're more lucky than me. They put in hard work too. It's because I didn't put enough effort in, and I in my head I wasn't comparing myself to them. It was more of like I need to make sure I work harder, and so I can actually become that same level as they were.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, with like the different niches, like I would say that you have a pretty broad niche
Yeah.
overall, so it's a lot harder to connect with like a very tight knit group. Whereas, yeah, a super niche channel that has 500,000 people, not the world to really expose themselves to, like they're itching for the content. So it's I feel like it makes sense, but at the same time, I know the frustration just because it's like, oh man, like I feel like I spent so much time learning this stuff and I can't figure it out. But yeah, I mean it's interesting. Content creation's a ride.
Well, and one thing that you're kind of right on the whole sense that all three of my channels are very wide ranging, and I do that on purpose, and I do try to market it in a certain way where it's like one niche. But this channel in particular, the Poly Tools, it's about all these different tools that have come out of the woodwork, and then interviewing modern content creators about their journeys and stuff like that. And the one thing is, a lot of these creator interview shows that are all over YouTube nowadays, most of them focus just on the YouTubers or just on the podcasters, maybe bloggers here and there. But there's something to be learned from any different type of creator, including like game streamers too. There's a lot of great game streamers who know a lot about content. I never see them on those creator shows, and it's one of those maybe gaming shows, but never creator spotlight shows. And so I wanted to have this multidisciplinary show where I have someone like you. Like when I first saw you, my brain thinks, oh, he's the podcast guy. But like you said, you started out with blogging and SEO. You have a YouTube channel, obviously too. Actually two or something like that, maybe more that I didn't even find. And the thing is, you do all three content types. And now in the modern era, you kind of need to. Out of those three content types, what do you make? What do you like to make the most?
Now I love video. I love every aspect of video. It's a lot more work, but I'm like a lifelong learner. Like I love learning new things, and I feel like editing a video, you can never stop learning. Like there's always something new that you can be trying and playing with. I mean, I would say social media probably helped me the most get to that point. Kind of fall in love with it, like just the reels, like the short clips type stuff, like super like low effort for the most part. I put a lot of effort into them, but comparing to like a 10-minute YouTube video, it seemed like relatively low effort.
Mhm.
And I just kind of fell in love with that process. And showing up on camera started getting fun. And then I stepped into YouTube a little bit more seriously with the NextGen podcaster channel.
Mhm.
And I just having fun playing with it and learning and understanding, and now trying to understand the storytelling aspect of it, because I think that's going to be huge coming up with all these AI tools and everything AI related. Storytelling is going to be the biggest piece of content creation, in my opinion. So it's just it's fun for me to continue expanding my mind and learning. So I definitely say video.
It's interesting too because there's a lot of meta changes going on right now. And one thing I really like talking to people about is that there is short form, long form, and live. And those are the three types or links, I guess you could say. And it's interesting to think about a lot of creators start out with one or the other, then they learn the next one, then they eventually learn the third one. So, like, you see the Twitch streamer who just did live streams and they eventually learn, oh, I need to make content in order to market this. So they either go to YouTube or TikTok, one or the other first, usually, and then they move on to the next one. I have interviewed people who are TikTokers who are now learning the ways of YouTube. I had a guest recently bring up a really good point where there's a lot of YouTubers who are now like disregarding short form content. They're like, I don't need that because I'm successful enough with my long form. But we're also seeing YouTubers now learn the short form stuff too. And there's that cross section in the middle. And it was interesting to think about like how you described the long form.
I guess I would kind of pin myself as like a short form creator going into long form. And to me, I see more opportunity in the long form. I think short form, a lot of people are going to the short form content for the entertainment purpose. And for me, and a lot of content I create, it's more in the education space. And I feel like you don't, at least not for me, I don't really go to TikTok for a lot of education. Yeah, I learn a ton just from scrolling the feed, but I'm not going there specifically to learn something. It's usually for entertainment. And I just happen to learn some stuff along the way. Whereas something like YouTube, that's where I'm going to go if I want my questions answered. I'm going to go search into YouTube. I usually end up with a long form video, not one of the shorts, and I get the information that way. So to me, it just made logical sense that if I'm going to create educational content, that it should be the long form YouTube side of things. But I get both sides. I just see a lot more potential, I guess, with the long form content, especially once you start factoring in monetization and things like that. Like YouTube trumps all when it comes to that kind of thing. So that was kind of my motivation is like, if I can earn an extra side of income from YouTube, even if it's little,
Mm-hmm.
like that's better than posting to TikTok and maybe earning a few pennies if I happen to get millions of views. So it was like, where do I want to spend most of my time? And that ended up being long form.
It is interesting that the way you talked about too. There's a lot of people who I've heard actually do go to TikTok when they want to search something or learn something. But I think it comes down to a generational thing. Like millennials were used to YouTube, and then like Gen Z are more like, okay, if I'm going to search for something, I'm going to do it on TikTok.
That yes, I've thought about that. Even as I was saying that, I was thinking about that because I think Gen Z is very much TikTok first, and I could be wrong. I'm just basically pinning the whole generation to one platform here, but I I've tried to put myself in that mindset and like gone to TikTok to actually search for stuff, and I just can't get the hang of it. Maybe I'm just getting
Hmm,
old. I don't know.
me too. What tools do you use for content creation and repurposing?
So, oh man, I use so many tools.
That's why like
Um,
this is a loaded question. I'm excited.
yeah, that's super loaded. I want to say right now one of my favorite tools for multiple facets of content creation is Perplexity AI. And I love that because I can get super detailed research from Perplexity. So anyone listening who's not used it, it's almost like if ChatGPT was a really smart, connected to the internet
Mm,
researcher for you. So I'll plug in topics or I'll ask questions and it'll pull together 20 sources where it gathered all this information from. And now what I like about that is that I have well-rounded view of a certain topic. So then I can take that like those responses and I can spin that into content. Like I could turn that into a blog post or maybe a video for my YouTube channel or even a podcast episode if I wanted to. Um, so that's one that I've been spending a lot of time with and really enjoying it. Let's
I love
see.
taking in a swath of information myself too, so I get that.
Yeah. Like, so I host it's an AI podcast. It's called the AI briefing. Like it's totally AI generated, AI scripted, AI hosted, like the voices, all AI. And I create that content from articles. And what I didn't like is that if I took the content from, say, TechCrunch about AI, I get that one person's perspective and that one kind of view of the
Mm-hmm.
topic. Or if I can plug that topic into Perplexity, I get TechCrunch's view, I get The Verge's view, I get everyone's kind of combined thoughts on the subject. And when I turn that into a script for that episode, I get like a more well-rounded answer. And I love that concept. So that's been a big one for me, especially with that AI briefing show.
I love the concept of that show too. I always thought about making an AI generated show, but trying to have a unique angle like what you just described there to make it to where it's like, okay, yes, it's AI, but we're using AI in a unique way, in a creative way. It's not just like, oh, I'm being lazy. It's like I'm using this to actually have a purpose.
Yeah, and I was more interested in the automation side of things. So pulling in automation tools into this whole mix. I've been spending a lot of time with Make. Um, it's been a mix between Make and Zapier. Zapier's doing some pretty cool stuff right now as well, but I've really gravitated towards how easy Make is to set up. And if you've ever used Zapier, Make is essentially the same thing. You basically go step by step, like plug in this tool, and then when this happens, do this, and when this happens, do this. So my goal with it was to see if I could totally automate everything. Like
Yeah.
I find the topics I want, and then AI pretty much does the rest. And I pretty much did. Like it is, I would say 80 to 90% totally automated, AI generated, and then I mix myself into it a little bit. I would say those are two really powerful tools that can really enhance your content creation and speed up a lot of the processes. Because content creation is it's a process.
That's why I like that question too, because everyone answers it differently. Some people just say like, "Oh yeah, Adobe Premiere, kind of simple." You went with the automation side of things, and for those who have been around for a while, Make used to be Integromat, and there's another one, by the way, Nick, called AutoMensch kind of thing. It's like an open source Zapier, so that might be interesting for you to try out too.
Definitely check that out.
I never got Zapier to work properly. I used it so many different times. It's also so expensive too, which is like when you said Make, I'm like, yeah, I get why you're over at Make. It's
Yeah.
interesting because I was trying to create an automation. I haven't actually talked about this on the show. I really wanted to maximize my social reach when I shared a post. So if I made a new YouTube video, I wanted an automation to send it out basically when it came out. So if I posted it in the morning, it will send the post to Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever, to all those platforms at the same time. Like, here's the link, here's the new episode, like go check it out. And then it would post the next day at the opposite time of day at night. And so that way I could maximize my audience's reach. But then it would post a week later, then a month later, then 6 months later, and then even a year later across all these different platforms. And that way it allowed for that one post to be maximized reach when it came to sharing and time. It's not necessarily like repurposing, it's more of just like maximizing how many times do I share it without being spammy, but also making sure I'm taking advantage of like most people aren't on the channels that you're sharing it to when you share it there. Even if you
Right.
just do that first step where it's the day and the night, you're still missing out on a lot of people who might not be on the social platform at all that week. And so it really kind of helps. Yeah, that's why I was using Zapier for. Basically, I was trying to at least.
Yeah. You should look at Lately AI. I don't know if you've played with that one or heard of that one. That one was probably one of the first AI tools that I started getting involved with. And their primary focus at the beginning was blog posts. So you'd take your blog post, you'd throw it in there. Then lately, they use their own AI, like they're not connected to OpenAI or Gemini or any of these other AI
Mhm.
platforms. They're like their own thing. And it will go find different pieces of your content to pull out to generate tweets. And I thought that was like the coolest thing. Then they started getting into the video side. So now you can load in one video and pull clips out of that video, or you can do blog posts and get that content. But it'll pull, like when I was doing podcast episodes, it would
Mhm.
pull like 100 different like short little clips that you could publish out and schedule out. So at one point, like I went hard with the blog posts that I had, and I had like an entire year's worth of Twitter posts like scheduled, ready to go, and it was the coolest thing. But to your point, like people, you don't know when they're going to be on. You don't know what's going to change in the algorithm, that maybe they do like viewing your content, but then for whatever reason, it's not in their feed anymore. Like a
Mhm.
lot of times you could post the same thing probably 5 times a day on Instagram Reels, as an example, and you're still not going to hit all your followers. So I really like that you said that, like republishing the same content, even if you're, yeah, a week, a month, a year, whatever it is, it's going to increase your chances of getting people that haven't seen that content yet. Yeah, there's going to be some crossover and bleed the people like I already saw this, but
Usually,
most
it's the
likely,
ones that like you the most that see it more than once anyway.
right, exactly. And they're probably not even going to care or even notice. They're like, oh, Dustin posted another piece of content. Let's watch this.
Lately was actually one of the first AI tools before ChatGPT came out, which was interesting. It also reminds me of Missing Letter, which is another one that kind of did the same thing. I've looked at all the social media management tools, and most of them for two different reasons. I actually it's nice to talk to somebody who gets this idea because RSS automation was my main goal. If I made a new YouTube video or blog post or podcast, I wanted to have that RSS feed, or YouTube's not really RSS, but you know what I mean, have that new post be sent out at least once to all these different platforms. So I don't have to worry about that as a solo creator. And what frustrates me is that there's basically hardly any platforms that can actually do it very well. There's a lot of platforms that support RSS feeds, but essentially they're just a reader that you can easily share from. I just wanted a direct auto post, just call it a day. Deliver It was a pretty good one, but their UI is pretty much ancient at this point. It's like 10 years old and they haven't really updated it at all. And they don't really keep up with the times very much. And I didn't really find the actual flow there too useful. Zapier couldn't get to work hardly at all. If This Then That did all right, but it mainly was kind of just yeah. I feel like lately Missing Letter would be really great for the blogs, but it's not really great for YouTube and podcast. And maybe I should have just been less picky and just tried multiple different tools at once. But it was interesting to think about. Right now, I use New Link, for example, and I don't know if you've tried that out, but they're pretty much the best when it comes to automations. And so you can create like, okay, there's a new YouTube video or blog post. It sends out the automation. They have an AI captioning tool using like GPT, and basically takes the information that it gets from the feed and creates an actual social caption for you. And I've had mixed results with that. I've had some that are really good, and then some that are really cheesy. And I got embarrassed that I actually posted it for me. But yeah, New Link is probably my favorite automation tool right now.
That sounds very interesting. I'm curious. So with that concept that you're like publishing or trying to get everything like pushed out all at once, do you see decent engagement like across every single platform, or are there certain platforms that do better than others? Because I know for me, like especially Instagram Reels, like Instagram, it was like when I was manually publishing, that kind of encouraged me to actually engage with more people.
Mm.
And I think by engaging, that just naturally brought more people to my channel. I ended up with more followers, more engagement on my own posts. Where if I was like just scheduling and pushing out everywhere, I probably wouldn't go on the platform and engage at all. So
Hmm.
I'm curious, like, do you see decent engagement across all the platforms doing that?
I think I should divide it up real quick and explain it differently. That automation I was talking about is RSS automation, just automatically sharing the post out. It wasn't really repurposing. I take this interview, I share it out to Twitter. That's great. I'm just sharing the link to it so people can see that it's out. But then I'm also going to toss this into Opus. I make clips out of it, then share those to Reels, Pinterest, TikTok, and Shorts. And that's where I feel like that gets more into what you're asking there, because that's the other reason why I looked at all these social media management tools: RSS automation, and then bulk scheduling, TikTok Shorts, and Reels.
Got
And
it. Okay.
like I think that with the sharing, it's mainly just helpful for the audience to be able to see it, and I just want to make sure it's out there. Like if I forget to share this, then I'm doing you an injustice as a host. But then sharing the pictures and reels and that kind of thing is a whole separate aspect. I do think I get engagement, but I'm also on the platforms a lot. I'm kind of a consumer in a way as well. I feel like as a creator, there is a level of consumption you need to do to understand the trends. Like when you stop consuming, you start to lose the pulse of social media.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and that makes a lot more sense. That's what makes content creation so difficult
Mm-hmm.
because you only have so much time in the day, and you're either creating content or you're needing to spend time on the platform, and it
Or
makes
learning.
getting or learning, and it makes getting like your reach spread across all those different platforms pretty difficult. Do you have like a primary focus? Like, do you focus like this is the platform that I really want to grow on, and then everything else is kind of like if it grows, great, but like this is my main focus.
So for a long while there, no. I guess technically my blog was my main focus. Like I care most about my blog before, and I still do, and I have like nearly 600 posts on there. But when it comes to focus, I've always been the mindset of being omni-channel, taking that polymatic approach. That's the whole premise of my main personal brand, anyways. And now I guess I could say YouTube's my main goal. Like if TikTok grows, great, but it also might be banned here soon too. So I don't know. If Instagram grows, great, but I'm gonna be there no matter what, anyways, because I've been on Instagram since it came out. And so I actually, this might be interesting to you. When I was posting my reels, I actually found myself losing followers because I was posting so many. But it wasn't the amount that I was posting in general. It was the fact that I was posting to the main feed, because there's a reels feed and the main feed. And a lot of my followers met me in real life. They don't care so much about my content, like, and so that disconnect was like, okay, now I realize what's going on. I stopped posting to the main feed, only posted the reels feed, and I saw an improvement from that.
Yeah, I always just post it to the main feed because I figured there's more chance of getting eyeballs on it.
But how many are
For
you
sure.
posting a day?
I was only doing one a day.
Yeah, I was doing like 8 to 10.
Oh, dang. Okay. Yeah. All right. I get it.
Yeah. Well, it was one of those things where using repurposing tools, it's great to have all these clips, but when you repurpose all your backlog of content, then now I had like 1,600 clips I needed to post. So I needed to get through them as quick as possible. Like you said before with the lately thing, like you had a whole bunch now, a whole year. It's like, I don't know how that feels.
To me, I kind of feel like I'd almost be the same way. Like all those other channels are great, but I'm probably going to just use those channels to send people to YouTube.
Yeah, that's the thing. I was
That's
mainly
the
wanting to
main
grow the
focus
YouTube
right
at
now.
this point. The whole you interviewing me aspect, that's fine. We're talking shop. That's why I like this show, even though it is an interview. And if we just spend the whole time interviewing you and asking questions, that's fine. But then sometimes we'll go on these tangents. Sometimes we'll go into these. Like, and now I'm getting into the meta commentary of the show itself. I really want to be a service to the people listening, trying to become a better creator. And like as a host, there's a lot of skills that I need to learn and relearn. I feel like you were mentioning earlier, like I don't know how to get started when it came to I don't remember exactly which one we were talking about, but for me, that's how it was with interviews. Like I always saw Lewis Howes and then John Lee DeMoss and then Gary Vee doing all these interviews, and I'm like, I want to do that. I had been a podcaster for 3 years, but I had no idea how to get started. Turns out it's pretty easy. You just ask people to come on, and boom, like you either say yes or no, and then you wait a month or two and ask them again. They say yes, okay, cool. That's how I got Ali Abdal on my first show. It was like I just kept asking him over and over again. He eventually came on,
That's
but
awesome.
the thing is, I used Matchmaker.fm for a while there, and that helped a lot when I find guests. But the point was, like, I knew what I wanted to do as a host. I knew how to host. I did enough research, enough learning, but practice. It wasn't until I actually started doing the reps that I actually learned, okay, I need to do this better. I need to do a better intro, that kind of thing.
Yeah, my first episodes, my first episode, because my show, the 9 5 podcast, I don't do that show anymore. I actually have a backlog of some interviews that I might just like silently release off to the side just to speak. But um, my very first interview that I did on my show was my brother,
Mm.
and the second interview that I did was my wife's cousin. And then the third
Awesome.
was someone that I met on Twitter, and we had just built like a relationship. So I was like getting guests from my inner circle. It still fit with the content and everything that I was going for with the show, but that really helped that whole process of like, yeah, that kind of almost stage fright kind of thing, and just get into that groove of interviewing because I was kind of in the same boat. Like I had a list of questions, and I was like, I'm just gonna start going through these and see what happens.
Mhm.
And like we talked about before, the reps, like as you do more, as you learn more, as you analyze yourself a little bit more, it just becomes a lot easier, and that's when it becomes fun, when you just can just like what we're doing right now, just shooting it.
Yeah, it's funny because I think like around 6 interviews in, I realized, oh, this is a major flaw in the flow of my show. It's not like, oh, if I kept doing it that way, I would be bad. But like, there was a much better way of doing it, and so like, okay, I reframed it. And then about 18 episodes in, I reframed it again. And basically from then, I never had to really adjust it except for when I made new shows or new styles of interviews. Like I had the round two interview, which is essentially the same thing, but it's having you back on and that kind of thing. But I have a slightly different format for it. And then this show was different too. So when I first started, I always kind of had the premise of doing a ton of research. We were talking about this before this call. I only made a couple unique questions for you on this call because I knew that the boilerplate questions would be interesting enough as it is because of the way that this show is formatted. I was actually thinking about talking to you about this before the show too. So I was like preparing the idea. But the other show, I spend a lot of time researching and going really in depth because we're going into each aspect of their multidisciplinary life. That's the whole premise of that what that show is about. So the research is really important. I still want to take in a swath of information about you, even on this show. So I'll look at all your profiles and I'll have them linked in the description. I actually didn't see AI briefing, so that's kind of interesting. I had to go dig around for there.
That one I've been like keeping it not silent, but I haven't posted a lot about it. Like there's certain communities that I've like talked about it, but I haven't done a whole lot promoting it. I was really curious to see what I could do with like YouTube search and just so people would listen and watch it. But so yeah, so that it makes sense why you're not seeing it.
Which is funny because I usually do pretty good digging. So I just, and good on you for keeping a secret. I actually, that's a kind of another topic. It's kind of fun. Like the idea of having a secret show or a secret blog or newsletter that it's under a different name or whatever, and like you don't have your information attached to it all. You just want to see if you can just test how it goes. I've seen YouTubers do this with like faceless channels and stuff like that, but I feel like with a blog and podcast it's a bit easier. But just making something and seeing how well you do, and just being able to experiment without having your own personal brand affect the performance of it.
Yeah, I've thought a lot about that. And the AI briefing, like, it wasn't meant to be like that. I just kind of got lazy on the social media side because I've been spending so much time elsewhere. Do you think about that a lot? Like, if I were just to start like a brand new channel where, yeah, it's either faceless or just a place to experiment and play, and that's what I'm doing a lot of now. But I feel like I'm still sticking to like certain rules and like strategies and things like that that I've heard other people talk about, and I don't let myself go too far away from that. I think with my own channel for some reason, I can't tell you why. Where if it was just like a completely anonymous channel, I'd almost feel like that freedom to just go crazy and do whatever and just see what sticks.
Yeah.
It's a fun concept to think about.
I also talk about on the show the idea of a content ecosystem. And for a lot of creators, it's not that big of a deal because they either have just a TikTok and YouTube, or maybe they have two YouTubes, but that's all they do is video. And so for you and for me, having a blog and podcast and YouTube channel and then TikTok and having them all kind of be their own thing, especially if you have different niches and different sub companies, sub brands, it really gets really important. How do you organize the information architecture of your ecosystem? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I actually this fits really well into one of the reasons I was so excited about podcasting to begin with, because in my I I love the idea of content. That was why I wanted to do video in the first place. It's like it's more content. You can repurpose that content like a little bit better than blog posts. Like, yeah, you can tweet it, but if you want to make additional content like videos, you now have to make that content. Like you can't just turn it in. Maybe now you can with some of the AI tools,
Yeah, like a
but
video or something like that, but still, yeah.
right. But with podcasting, it was like if I did podcasting, which is primarily audio, but I had a camera on myself. Now I have audio, I have video, and I can get that transcribed and I can turn that into written content very easily. So my thought has ever since then is like if I can get the video feed of whatever the content is I want to create, I can make every other piece of content on this earth from that one piece of video content. And now it's just a matter of how do I transition that content from a video to audio only, from the audio to the blog post to the social media post, and etc.
Mhm.
And that's where it's kind of fun, but yet difficult to like figure out the best workflow to make that happen. But in my opinion, like you can't go wrong with a piece of video content because it's so much more than
I
that.
definitely think that all three pillar type could be made into all three pillar type, not just because of automation, but there's ways of doing it. Like you could have taken a blog post and then use like Video Scribe to make a whiteboard video of it or something like that. There's ways of doing it even before all these the rise of AI tools. But this is something I was thinking about too, which is probably going into another tangent here with both of us. The idea of the recycling symbol, where you have the video, audio, and written, and then how they all recycle into each other. And I think that that is another premise of something that needs to be explored more, needs to have more thoughts, I think, on like more experimentation, understanding the idea of not just repurposing, but refactoring the content. Because sure, I can repurpose this video into a podcast. That's great. But like, how do I refactor it into like a micro podcast? Maybe taking just a short clip of it and doing it that way or something like that. Like really kind of changing the format and maybe turn it into a quote image or something. Point is, I was playing around with this. I was using like a mind map tool, like Miro or something like that. And I had all three pillar types there and had like this weird circle that I all led into each other. But then I had it spread out into all the other platforms. So thinking, okay, I could take the blog post and make tweets and quote images. I could take the podcast and make audiograms. And then there's not really a short form platform for audio. There was a guy who I was talking to on Reddit who's trying to build one on like as a side project, and that's really interesting. I think there's a lot of potential there for like short form audio experiences, but there's not anything out there just yet for it. Spotify might be the first to do it too. I don't know. But then we have, video memes and just clips when it comes to the video. So there's ways of repurposing it into all these different aspects, all these different arms, not to mention sharing the content too. I consider sharing the video into a tweet and sharing that blog post into a tweet as its own piece of content, sure. And I was really obsessed with Gary Vee's topic of creating 100 pieces of content a day. Because I was like, it's not really about creating, it's more about just making it happen through either automation or strategy.
I think I know the exact one. He released like a PDF on his birthday that was like turn one piece of content into like 64 pieces of content, or sorry, 64 pieces of content in a day or whatever it was. Yeah, that inspired me a lot too.
Well, the thing is that that slide deck is way too macro. He doesn't get into the weeds enough because really he has his team behind him. He doesn't always
Right.
talk about that. And while he did do a lot of it by on his own, I give him props for it. He does have a team now, and now we have AI tools and different AI agents we could use and stuff like that. But unless you have a really orchestrated system for all this AI automation, which, as you and I know, it's like you still have to set it up yourself right now. Even with like repurpose.io and all these other tools, it's still one of those things you have to like really manually do. So it's just interesting to think about. I'm going on a tangent here, so I figure I'll give you the stage.
No, that's good. I mean, to me, that whole idea of repurposing the content, and I like how you put it, like refactoring the content into something unique. That was where I wanted to go with a lot of my stuff as well. And you mentioned Gary Vee quite a bit in this show, and he talked about it as well. Like when you create content, you're creating content for the platform that you're posting it on. You're not necessarily like to effectively do it. And even something as simple as you create a video that says, "Hey Instagram, what's up?" And that's the version that goes on Instagram. Or, "Hey TikTok, I have something to show you." Things like that that don't seem like a lot. They add a decent amount of work at times, but things like that can make it platform specific, can have a pretty big effect. And when you can even cater that to a further, like deeper level, like what you're talking, I feel like that's really powerful, and it allows you to get a lot further faster, in my opinion.
I think, yeah, definitely, I agree on that. I think just kind of delving into this idea a little bit more. Hopefully, you can kind of have the synergy idea, come up with something new here, because it's a fascinating concept. In fact, this channel started out because of that same concept. I was obsessed with trying to find a way of refactoring it, like as the strategy, not so much repurposing, but using repurposing as the arms, but the actual brain. If you're looking at an octopus, like the actual head of it, all three pillar types, the arms are repurposing and sharing. I was thinking about how do I make that into a strategy. So I came up with this idea called the Omni Content series. I eventually realized that's trademarked by some omni-channel e-commerce company, so I had to like change it. But the Poly content was what I ended up changing it to, and then I eventually cut it down to just Poly tools. But that's where this channel came from. It's this Poly content model that I created based off of Gary Vee's kind of model too. And Doc Williams also made a version 2 of Gary Vee's content model. So built off these different giants. But the idea was I'm making a blog post and video and podcast every episode. The episodes themselves don't have to be all within one niche. The actual series is about the strategy, not so much the topics. And for me, I start out with blogging. I've always been a writer. So I started out with a blog. I use those bullet points to make the video, and then I cut out the audio and make it into a podcast. And while I think I could have done better with the podcast aspect, I think the video and blog did really well when it came to the creation. It was refactoring that same thing. I wasn't just using an AI tool to read over the blog post. I was using it as a basis for the video. So the video had its own essence too. So after sharing it with you, do you have any thoughts or add-ons to that?
That was something that I was doing kind of in the reverse of what you're talking, where I was taking my podcast episode, and yes, I would have like a show notes page on my website, but I would also create like related blog posts on some of the discussion. Like it'd be related to the topic, but it wouldn't be like a direct mirror to the content itself. Like maybe I focus on like one key point that we talked about in the episode, I would do a blog post for. To me, it was mainly for SEO purposes, because I felt like people are going to search for a specific topic. They're not necessarily going to search for the podcast episode, maybe, and like the full, like three main points that we discussed in that episode, but they might be searching for one specific aspect of it. So if I can provide additional information on that one topic and people find it, then I point them to the podcast episode as well and say, "Hey, like if you enjoyed this, I actually interviewed this person over here where we talked about this, but we talked about X, Y, and Z as well.
Mm.
So go check that out." So now I'm kind of catching SEO from two different aspects and all funneling people to my podcast, but it allowed me to expand my content as well and just ultimately get more content out. Now with AI, I feel like that I would have been pumping out blog posts left and right just to point all to episodes.
So it's interesting to think about when it comes to like I was blogging first, but I would always embed the video and podcast into the blog post. And part of my motivation was also the fact that everybody consumes content differently. They're like some people want to watch, some people want to listen while they go for a walk, and some people want to read. That's just how they consume the content. And so my mindset was like I want to create that same episode for someone who's consuming it in that particular manner. And then like you said too, like if they do the video was different technically. Like I'm using it, the blog post as bullet points, but I might add in another topic or another side tangent in the video, which makes it a separate piece. It adds to the whole ecosystem, which is why I thought the podcast was a bit lacking. I didn't really like add anything to it. But we're kind of getting into the meta of content creating as a skill, because when you first start out, you had the 100 reps, like, okay, I'm making a video, I'm making a podcast, I'm making a blog post, and then you learn all three. There's usually a lot of creators, from what I can tell, like 80% of them, once they do one of them, they expand to one of the others or all three, and they learn that. But then you kind of learn the next layer, which is repurposing. And now we're getting to like the layer above that, which is automation too. And then maybe there's a layer that we're talking about now, or maybe automation is just part of the whole thing. But the idea of how do you refactor, how do you transform your content, and yeah, like it's almost alchemy of content.
Yeah, and like how do you manage it? Like that's the big, like you said, you end up with 1,500 clips, and it's like, what do I do with all this stuff?
I will say what I did do is like I looked at every single social media management tool, and while Opus has a scheduler now, a lot of my clips I made before that scheduler was out, and also like it doesn't really help with bulk. It helps with just sharing them one-offs. And so I was using Publer, which was one of the best tools for bulk up, like multi, not bulk, but multi uploading different clips. But it was still very tedious per like social post. You had to change the caption. You had to basically modify for each platform for every single clip. So that adds up.
Mhm.
And they made it needlessly tedious when like other tools were a lot simpler for individuals posts. But it was the best at uploading multiple at a time. It kept breaking on me, so I moved on. I've been working with recently Recur Post, and hopefully that works out. But they made a bulk upload feature for me. It's still one of the things where like the actual tool itself is not quite ideal in my opinion when it came to like UI and UX. UI is all right, but the UX, the flow of it all, I'm so used to these other tools, it's just different. But the actual bulk uploading is a lot easier with Recur Post. But other than that, there's not really an easy way of just syndicating all this content.
Especially now with AI, like I feel like that's going to be the the big problem. Is like I have so much content, I don't know what to do with it now.
So one aspect that I'm working on, in fact, I was literally working on it today. One of my meetings was with the person who helped me make the theme, is my PolyTools directory, which is what the show and channel is built around. Is this whole PolyTools AI website directory. You made your own AI tool. Well, mine's not AI focused. Mine's more creator focused, but yours is too. Point is, creator tools, AI tools. You made your own directory. Can you explain your motivations behind that?
Again, the initial seed of it was kind of SEO focused. Um, we really wanted to get that out there and then drive as much traffic as we could to that because we thought it was just going to be an awesome platform. But the whole idea was AI tools for podcasters. So my co-founder and NextGen podcaster and I, we pulled together, we searched online, we had played with a lot of these tools and just started digging into all kinds of different AI things and tried to see where people could use them. Because that was the big thing, especially when ChatGPT came out. It was like all these other tools came out. And it was like,
No one was
yeah,
talking about it either. That's another reason why I did this channel too. Like, I'm glad that you saw the same thing because no one was talking about these tools.
yeah. And they were like everywhere. And then on social media, it was like, oh, there's an AI tool, there's an AI tool, there's an AI tool. And everyone's like, what the hell do I do? There's so much going on and I can't keep up. So we're like, we can create this platform or this directory, if you will, where you go find the tool that you need. Do you need something for social media? You check the little social media box, and here are some of the AI tools that you can use for social media. You want something for writing your content? You check the box. Here are your tools for writing content, where you were going to find the tool that you needed and not necessarily just like get bombarded with tools from every direction. They're like, you need to use this, and you need to use this, and you need to use this. And you're like, I don't know, even like it's the paralysis thing. So we wanted it to be very much focused on that individual's needs. But I mean, that page does really well for us. Like we get a lot of traffic. We've had brands reach out to us, which I think is kind of fun. They'll reach out and they'll be like, "Hey, we're not on that list.
How do
What
I
do
get
we
on
have
the
to
list?
do to get on that list?" It's like, let's talk. No, we haven't made anybody pay to get on, but we've talked about it. Like
Yeah,
that would be a pretty slick strategy,
some
especially
of them
when
do that.
AI is so hot. Yeah, exactly. That was kind of the inspiration and motivation behind a lot of it was help organize some of that stuff for people, and SEO will hopefully help us as well.
That's again the same motivation for my website as well. It's interesting because one of my fellow podcast friends, he has a show called Time for Your Hobby. Me and him created like a Google Doc of a whole bunch of different resources. He started it, but I added a whole bunch of my own stuff to it, and it was a resource for podcasters. And it's just interesting too because once all these AI tools came out of the woodwork, it's like we couldn't keep updating that doc as easily, and it just kept getting too cluttered. I also, for me in particular, it wasn't just really the podcasting tools. Tools like Opus came out of the woodwork. So there's Opus Clip, there's Munch, there's Minvo, there's Choppity, Too Short, all these different clones that had come out after Opus really got popular. But there was also Recast Studio too, and Video had copied Recast Studio before Opus even came out. So it's just one of those things where all these different tools are on the market. And when you looked at some of the bigger websites, Futurepedia, FutureTools.io, most of them were lacking a lot of these content repurposing tools. They maybe had a 30, 40% max of what all the tools were on the market. I wanted to have a place that had all of them.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I frequented several of those pages for a while, like as I was looking for more tools to include. Now I feel like you can't even really keep up with it. Like it, it's tough, but I'm excited to see what that directory and everything looks like for you because they're they're helpful. They're really helpful and they're really fun to kind of play with and explore. So I'm excited for you.
I actually built it back in February, but I did it on Framer. And ironically, so this is kind of just a little tangent. As a tools guy, as you know how it is, you have all these tools at your disposal. I couldn't find the right tool to build the website. I definitely did not want to use WordPress. I don't like WordPress as much anymore. I wanted to use Ghost, which is what I use my main website on. It's a really good CMS, but I couldn't find the right theme. So I ended up using Framer, which is an alternative to Webflow. It's kind of like do it yourself WYSIWYG website builder. But the CMS behind it, the actual like inputting all the tools was terrible. And then on top of that, I could not optimize it. It looks great, but it's so slow. And maybe it's because I'm on the free plan too. But even in the back end, it's just taking ages to like go through. I'm like, okay, something's not right here. And I can't figure out how to optimize it any more than I already have. So I optimized it like 3 times already. So I didn't want to release it in that state, even after adding like 800 tools to it. And I was like, okay, I need to actually make a better one. This last weekend, I found a good theme. I started working on it this week. I actually talked to the guy today, like I mentioned. He helped me fix a couple issues with it, and then all of a sudden now, like this is actually really good, and I can add all the tools to it. So again, that's another 1,000 tools to add. What brought about your endeavors, 9 to 5 freedom, and NextGen podcaster?
That one to me, it was I kind of discovered that entrepreneurship was something that anyone could do. I stumbled on a book that really inspired me, and I realized, hey, like this is doable.
Mm.
And then I ran into the Pat Flynn, the Smart Passive Income podcast, and I was like, holy crap, there's all these people that are doing it. I was like, that means I could do it.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, I was like, there's got to be other people that are in that same situation where they're like, whatever career I'm in right now just doesn't fit me. Like, I don't belong here. What else can I do? Since I didn't know that that was a possibility, I figured other people didn't know it was a possibility. So that was the 9 to 5 to freedom brand, was like how to help people like follow my journey from going from a 9 to 5 into freedom. Like I'm in it right now. I'm not free. So it's like, come with me as I learn. And like, that's kind of how the whole like brand evolved, and the podcast came out of that, interviewing people who have done that exact thing. And it was just a lot of fun. And then the NextGen podcaster, that came out, the co-founder that I mentioned, Mark Ronick, we ended up meeting, I think through like an Instagram or Facebook group or something like that. He was a podcast producer. I was just getting into the podcast coaching scene, and we connected really well, started creating content together, doing that kind of thing, collaborating, and ChatGPT dropped, and we're like, holy crap, like podcasters could use this. And we had already been talking about like, how do we kind of partner up on something to like go after something. We're like, this is the opportunity. Like, this is what we need to do. Like, we need to show podcasters how to use these tools. Like, that's so great. And then that spawned NextGen Podcaster, and now it's a whole community that we're currently still building and creating content around, and just having a lot of fun with AI, learning how to use these different tools, what makes your workflow better, what can be automated, what can't be automated, what should or shouldn't you automate.
Yeah,
And
that's a good
that's a
question.
big thing too, is like, how do you do it ethically?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a big concern a lot of people have, is like, how do we go about this the right way and not just take advantage of it because it's easy?
I would definitely double down on those last 2 topics too, because I don't think enough people are talking about them. I follow a lot of the major AI creators, like Matt Wolf, obviously, too, and whatnot. As a creator, there's this fear that AI is going to take our jobs. Like, oh, it's going to take away our graphics designers. Like, no, usually there's going to be plenty of space for human designers as well. And I think there's also a really good synergy between AI and humans. And I really want to tell this. I have a whole little like, side tangent story for you, Nick. I'm excited for it. Because when ChatGPT really got popular around like December of not last year, but the year before, 2022, I was like, I kind of knew about it. I think I had looked at it in the past, but really just ChatGPT 3 just came out, and it was like everyone was talking about it. I had like 3 people telling me you should play with it, you should play with it. Eventually, at the end of December, I finally got around to doing it, and I had always like this idea for making my own video game, and I wanted to like I had some graphic design skills to make little sprite characters and to make the world maps, but I didn't really have the skills for coding. I didn't have the skills for making the artwork to like build everything else off of. So I was messing with ChatGPT, and it helped me flesh out the ideas of the plot, the characters. How do I make it different from other IPs of similar topics? And it really like exploded the whole ideas and the actual development of the game. And then I started using like Dolly and Midjourney and all these other tools to create basically artwork for all the characters in the game. And I was like, this is actually getting like really out of hand. Like, I need to spend some time working on this. I let myself, I needed to make content last year really bad. I needed to catch up. But I was like, I'm going to spend the whole month of January work on this project because this is something I can't ignore. Like, this is actually really cool. And I'm glad I did. I was learning how to code and stuff like that to do it, and I made a lot of progress on this game. I didn't release it because it's too big of a project to just do in 1 month. But the idea was I was using AI to accelerate my own human creativity, and then on top of that too, I was hiring AI designers to take the AI beta design and make it into a more cohesive style. And I think that that's kind of a combined factor that people don't think about. Like, I'm using AI to generate a whole bunch of ideas, and maybe if they're really good, I might use it. Just like, I actually found one of the designs was so good that I made it the mascot of the game because it was just perfect right off the bat, even just from AI. But I still had a human AI, a human designer to change the AI design to make it a little bit more.
And that's kind of the approach that I think about it as well. Like AI is really good for getting those ideas like out. Like you have something in your head and you might not have the technical know how to do it, or you just might not be able to get it out and produce it into the world. And it gives you that, like, at the very least, that first draft of like, this is what it could be.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, then you incorporate, because I played in graphic design, but I'm not a graphic designer. Like, I'm going to send it to a professional.
Yeah.
So if I have this idea and I was like, hey, this is like the main idea of this, make it a reality for me. Like, that's awesome. I love that concept. A lot of these AI tools, like, continue on the graphic design thing. Like, designers are like, well, Dolly's just going to get rid of my job for me because AI can just generate it. As the expert graphic designer or artist, you have a certain skill set and knowledge, and even just like the jargon and how to frame and word things to get what you want out of a platform like that, that I wouldn't know. Like, you're going to be thinking about the different elements going on in the background that I might not even think about. And you have the ability to craft like a better masterpiece than I ever could. And that's just because you have that expertise. So I think these creators and these artists and everything, they should be taking advantage of this stuff and learning it and understanding it just as much as anybody else who might not have the skills. Because I think they're going to be able to create even better stuff with it
Yeah.
than what just like anybody could.
It's not just even about like, oh, it's going to take our jobs. It's like, it's not really AI taking their jobs. It's people using AI that are going to take your
Right.
jobs.
Exactly.
And on top of that too, it's all about scalability. AI, it still takes the creativity, still takes the ingenuity to make a good prompt, and it helps you do more. I don't know how I feel about this, but it's an interesting topic nonetheless to discuss. Is that I saw this job posting that went pretty viral for a little bit, where a kind of low tier, mid tier gaming website, news website, decided to fire their writers, and then was had or like most of our writers, and then had a job posting for one AI writer to basically use AI to generate like 40 posts a week, or maybe like 10 posts a day, or something like that. Firing people to do that is not a cool thing. And back then too, this was like early last year, AI still wasn't as good when it came to writing unique pieces, at least to some degree. If you've messed with it, obviously you can, but in the way that they were describing it, I think they were just trying to be like a farm. But it was just interesting to think about, like, if you do well enough and you have a good strategy and you're actually trying to be creative and you're using the human ingenuity aspect to it, then what they did there times the ingenuity, I think would actually be a really good combination. But they lack that creativity aspect, and you're just trying to become a content farm. There's a difference. There's that dichotomy there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think they're at least where we're at right now. Like, AI is getting really good. It's gotten a lot better from GPT-3 and all that. I think there still needs to be that human element of it. I mean, we spent a lot of time in this interview episode talking about podcasting and video creation. And one of the biggest things when I launched the AI briefing, with that being all AI generated, I went to podcasting groups and I posted it out there and I said, hey, I want you guys to check this out. There's this little experiment that I'm working on. It's completely AI generated podcast. Like, watch this video. Let me know what you think. I'm like really curious what you think about it. And it was very mixed, but I
Mm.
was very pleasantly surprised by the amount of people that were like, hey, I would actually listen to this.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the people that were saying they would listen to it is because it's a short show. It's a short, fact-based, like news-based show. Like there's not a lot of like me building rapport with the audience kind of thing, like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of podcasts are. But that was the one common denominator for a lot of people of why they wouldn't listen to an AI show, is because they want to build that connection with the host. They want to feel emotionally connected to the content and to the person creating that content. And just knowing that the show is AI generated, you flip that emotional switch off, because you're like, it's not even a person. Like, why do I care?
Mm-hmm.
And when you have that human behind it, you're like, oh, like I actually feel something because that there's a human behind it. So it's really interesting as we're talking about content creation and AI. Is like,
Yeah.
at what point do you lose that human to human connection that you can build to where it's just like nothing? That can be a huge opportunity for creators that feel like they're going to lose their jobs.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of people that are going to take advantage of how easy it is to do it and just put out garbage content. And people are going to be looking, where do I find the good content? Well, you as the creator, although you might be utilizing AI tools to help you, you can be that connection that people are looking for in the sea of just mass generated garbage that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's a place for AI in content creation. We just have to learn to use it to our advantage and not just like turn a blind eye to it and pretend it doesn't exist.
That's a very good point there, Nick. And I think too the interesting idea of oversaturation of content, because I didn't really think about this so much when it came to AI. Because what I was actually more worried about is humans, other humans. There's other countries around the world that are a bit behind when it came to internet trends and like the overall growth. So like while obviously there's places in Africa and Brazil who have it, they have internet access obviously too, and they're doing other things. The progress of where they're at in the internet, like Web 2, Web 3 kind of thing, they're just a little bit more behind, and eventually they're going to start becoming more and more content creators. We're seeing that happen around the world, and it has nothing to do with like first or third world kind of thing. It's more just the progress of experience in those in the internet. As people get more and more used to internet and creating content, we're going to see a lot more creators coming from Africa, a lot more creators coming from South America, Asia, the Pacifica, and that kind of thing. It's just very interesting to think about now. Like I always love hearing it. I hate hearing it, but I love hearing it because it makes me laugh. The idea, like, oh, it's too late to start podcasting now. It's oversaturated. There's too many podcasts out there. It's too late to start YouTube because, like, the first wave of YouTube's over. There's no point anymore. People were saying that back in 2018, 2019. They were saying that about TikTok in 2020. It's too late to get started. I've been on it since 2018. That's not true. It was just one of those things where it was really funny to see those different waves of podcasting, different waves of TikTok, and people saying it's too late, it's too late. And then 2 years later, there's people blowing up because they did it right. They understood the trends of that time. And then once we see all these other humans coming into the world of content, they're going to be doing it too. And so we're going to see an explosion of how much content on the internet. Not to mention too now the AI aspect behind it too. And so between those two things, it's going to flood the attention of just everything, written, audio, and video.
I mentioned this earlier on in the episode. I think storytelling is going to be the big driver of a lot of this. Going back to that emotion aspect, like people want to connect, and they're going to want to connect even more with the stories and the experiences that you've had. And I think that's going to be the big driver. That's going to be the big differentiator between what Joe Schmo generating AI content and Sally down the street generating AI content and you, is the story. You can't fabricate a real story, and people can smell BS from a mile away.
Yeah.
So I mean, they're going to see through it and know if something's artificially generated, no matter how good the stuff gets. So I really think that's why I'm spending so much time now, is like honing my storytelling skills and figuring out how do I become a better storyteller, because I think that that's going to be the differentiator here going forward.
One more question before we wrap up here. What do you have coming down the line that you're looking forward to?
So I guess I don't know when this episode is going to go live, but at the end of June we have a live event that we're putting on for independent podcasters, and it's called Empower Podcasting Event. So depending on when this episode goes live, it may have already happened, but this is something that we started kind of planning. I've been not as involved with the planning as my co-founder has been. We started doing this in January, coming up with the whole idea, and it's like we're less than a month away, well, at the time that we're recording this, from when this live event is happening, and it's just crazy. There's going to be so many podcasters there, a lot of experts coming and speaking on the topic. So that's a big exciting one. The live event space is something completely new to me specifically, and a lot of people that helped put the thing together as well. Then from there, I mean, continuing to experiment with AI automation stuff. I really want to see how far you can take an AI podcast. How successful can an AI podcast actually be
Mhm.
before people are like, yeah, I'm sick of this. I'm over it.
Who knows? Maybe you get a second wave of people like, oh, I really love this too.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And you never know. It's just kind of been a fun experiment.
Poweredpodcasting.com.
Yes, it is.
So I have links in the description for you there too, and it's interesting to think about. This episode should be out by then, hopefully. I'm working on one creator interview this week, and then I'm gonna try to get the other one this weekend, and you'll be in, like, early next week. So hopefully it'll be out by then. But other than that, where can people find you online?
So probably the best places to find me would be our website. So nextgenpodcaster.com would probably be the main place. And then our YouTube channel is NextGen Podcaster as well. Those two are the main places to find our content. If you want to get in contact with me specifically, probably Instagram at 95free, which is all spelled out and confusing because I didn't think about it ahead of time.
Oh,
So
no.
you have to spell out 95 and then free.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you hit me up on Instagram, I'm usually pretty quick to respond over there.
Well, and you and I actually met on TikTok, but we moved over to Instagram pretty quickly because it's so much better to talk on there.
Well, and I saw you message me, and I almost didn't respond because I was like, "Who is this guy? What does he want? What is he trying to sell me?" And when I started looking at some of the stuff, I was like, "Okay, he seems legit. I guess I'll respond." And I'm glad I did. This has been a lot of fun.
It has been a lot of fun. And it was one of those things too where I also asked you right away without building up really any rapport because I was like, I watched your content and I was like, I like this guy. I want to interview him. It was so quick. I just made the decision. I was like, I want to interview him. There's no second guessing about that. And I'm glad I did because the more I dug into you too, the more obviously fit you were for the show. But I'm glad that you responded.
Yeah, I'm glad. This was a lot of fun. Like I said, I always love talking content creation and AI now and all this stuff. So I really appreciate you having me on and letting me be a part of this journey that you're having.
Thank you. Nick Nalbach and Dustin PolyInnovator on the PolyTools Creator Spotlight. Thanks, everybody.